everything the Fed did wrong following the 2008 financial crisis that it caused made the problem worse. So Walsh was at the Fed when they were laying the foundation for the 2008 financial crisis, and then he was at the Fed when they made all the mistakes with all the Wall Street and bank bailouts, right? So as far as I'm concerned, he's a horrible candidate, and he's at the top of the short list to replace Powell, right? So he'd be way worse. But let's say this guy comes in and everybody believes he's just a yes man. And in fact, he did an interview this week in which he stated that he believes that there should actually be a partnership, an official partnership between the chairman of the Fed and the Secretary of the Treasury, that they should work together, which is a horrible idea. Now, I think they have been, kind of de facto partners, and they certainly were, I think, during the years after the 2008 financial crisis. It was pretty clear that they were acting hand in glove to me. When Donald Trump ran for president the first time, he called out Janet Yellen for leaving interest rates too low. He accused her of being political, of trying to help the Obama administration by artificially boosting the economy with low interest rates. Well, that's exactly what he wants Powell to do. That's exactly why he wants to fire Powell or get Powell to resign, maybe over the controversy of the renovation costs of the Fed's headquarters. But whatever, he wants to get rid of Powell because he won't do for him exactly what he criticized Yellen of doing for Obama. Again, another example of the Trump hypocrisy, the difference between Trump as a candidate and Trump as a president. Because you remember, he's very consistent, right? So at least I got to give Trump that. He's a hypocrite, but he is consistently hypocritical, right? Because when he ran for office the first time, he kept looking at these government unemployment numbers, right? The official numbers, 4.5%, 5%. And he kept saying, these numbers are BS. The real rate of unemployment is 10%, 15%, 20%, 30%.
As a candidate, Trump slammed official unemployment statistics as fake, claiming real joblessness was far higher. But once in office, he embraced the same numbers to trumpet economic success. Today, he's doing the same with Powell, flip-flopping from criticizing easy monetary policy to demanding it. Trump doesn't want Powell out. He wants a scapegoat. If things go wrong, Powell takes the fall. If they go right, Trump claims victory. It's a political chess move, not a sincere economic stance. This consistent hypocrisy raises concerns about how monetary policy is being politicized for short-term political gain.
Every time he gave a speech, the real rate of unemployment was even higher, right, than the previous. He kept ratcheting it up, right? But the minute he was president, he pointed to the same unemployment figures that he said were fake when Obama was president, and then used those very figures to tout the success of his own economic policies, because he said, look how low unemployment is. I'm doing great. And he's doing the same thing now. He's pointing to this bogus unemployment number and saying, hey, I've got the greatest economy. Look how low unemployment is, based on the same fake numbers, right? Or the numbers that he accused of being fake when he wasn't president. So he's doing the same thing with the Fed. He was correct to criticize Yellen for being too easy. He is incorrect in his criticism of Powell for being too tight. But I think Trump is probably smart enough to realize that the last thing he wants is for Powell to actually resign, and he doesn't want to fire him. I think Trump wants to keep Powell exactly where he is so he can use him as a foil, so he can blame whatever problems happen on Powell. And if Powell doesn't cut rates and we do have a problem, then Trump can say, I told you so. I wanted to fire him, but I couldn't do it, right? If he does fire him, or if Powell resigns on his own or, from pressure, now what? Now Trump's going to put in a yes man to take his place, but now anything that guy does, or gal, although the front runner is this guy, Kevin Warsh, but whatever that person does, he's going to have to accept responsibility, because it's the person that he just put in to to take his place.
Despite all the noise, Trump may actually prefer to keep Powell in place. Why? It gives him someone to blame without having to own the consequences of Fed decisions. If Powell is forced out, Trump must appoint a successor, and that successor becomes Trump's responsibility. Markets might react negatively, and public perception of independence could erode. By keeping Powell, Trump continues to campaign against bad Fed policy without bearing direct accountability. It's politically convenient and strategically effective, allowing Trump to both criticize the Fed and distance himself from its results.
So I think it's much better for Trump to just keep Powell where he is. Plus, if Powell does step down, you do risk a reaction in the markets. Although the markets don't seem to be reacting very much to the possibility, maybe they just think the same way that I do, that it's all just a bunch of talk, like a lot of the tariffs. They believe the tariffs are talk, and I'm going to get to that later. But I would agree. I think it's just talk, but I think it's also damaging the perception of Fed credibility. Because, I think if Powell were to step down, or even when Powell finishes his term, if they put in this guy, let's say Kevin Warsh, who I think is a bad choice. He was a FOMC member right after the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, he was there before the crisis. He was there, I think, from 2006 to 2011. So he didn't see the crisis coming, right? I saw it from a mile away, so he doesn't really know his stuff. But he was really like the liaison between the Fed and Wall Street during all the bailouts.
Rumors suggest Kevin Warsh is Trump's top pick to replace Powell. Warsh, a former Fed governor during the 2008 crisis, has a controversial track record. He failed to foresee the housing collapse and supported bailouts that worsened moral hazard. Now he's advocating for a formal partnership between the Treasury and the Fed, essentially merging monetary and fiscal authority. Critics argue this would destroy the illusion of Fed independence, already fragile. Warsh's appointment would signal a shift toward a politicized Federal Reserve, where economic decisions align directly with the president's agenda, undermining trust and stability in global markets.
Everything the Fed did wrong following the 2008 financial crisis that it caused made the problem worse. So Walsh was at the Fed when they were laying the foundation for the 2008 financial crisis, and then he was at the Fed when they made all the mistakes with all the Wall Street and bank bailouts, right? So as far as I'm concerned, he's a horrible candidate, and he's at the top of the short list to replace Powell, right? So he'd be way worse. But let's say this guy comes in and everybody believes he's just a yes man. And in fact, he did an interview this week in which he stated that he believes that there should actually be a partnership, an official partnership between the chairman of the Fed and the Secretary of the Treasury, that they should work together, which is a horrible idea. Now, I think they have been, kind of de facto partners, and they certainly were, I think, during the years after the 2008 financial crisis. It was pretty clear that they were acting hand in glove to me. But they needed to back away from that, because they have to maintain at least a pretense that that's not happening. But if you make it official, if you actually say, hey, the Fed chair and the Secretary of the Treasury are working together as partners, well, you've completely destroyed even the appearance of credibility of Fed independence. And that's really all the dollar has. I mean, it doesn't have any real backing anymore. It's not defined by gold and silver, technically, the way it is in the Constitution and the way it was up until 1971. It's a pure fiat currency. And we have massive trade deficits and budget deficits. So the only thing the dollar's got is its reputation. And that's built on confidence. That's built on trust. I think it's misplaced confidence and trust. But a lot of it stems from the supposed independence between the Federal Reserve and the government.
The U.S. dollar is backed not by gold or commodities, but by confidence in U.S. institutions, especially the Federal Reserve. If the Fed is perceived as a political tool, that confidence could unravel. Warsh's proposal to formalize collaboration between the Fed and Treasury threatens the very credibility that gives the dollar global dominance. Even if this alliance already exists in practice, acknowledging it publicly would be catastrophic. The illusion of independence matters. Losing it would weaken the dollar, spook global investors, and make U.S. debt harder to finance, especially with ballooning deficits and relentless money printing.
If you destroy even that pretense by officially proclaiming this partnership between the Fed chairman and the Powell, well then, or between the Fed chairman and the Secretary of Treasury, what do you got left? You got nothing. And I think it would be a dangerous step to make because, number one, even if they had this partnership, the Fed chairman only has one vote. There's 12 members of the FOMC. So the chairman of the Federal Reserve doesn't dictate monetary policy, right? It's up to the majority. And I actually think his credibility with the other 11 members would be lessened if they thought he was being political, right? They would just take everything he said with a grain of salt. It would probably make him less effective at his job in reality. But that might not be the perception. The perception would just be, oh, the Fed chair calls the shots, and we all know he's a political hack. So there's no more independence. So that is the danger, I think, that Trump is pushing with his constant attacks. Because even if Powell resists all the calls for him to step aside, when he finally does, and we get a guy like Kevin Warsh as Fed chair, people are going to know that he's not really independent. And the question is, how will that impact the other 11 members? Will they completely ignore what he says? Or will he be able to lead the rest of the members in the direction that he wants to go? I mean, that's really the power of the Fed chair.
Trump's efforts to influence the Fed are part of a broader ambition: control over both fiscal and monetary policy. If he installs a loyalist like Warsh, the president effectively becomes the Fed chair in spirit. This would create a dangerous precedent. The Federal Reserve is supposed to act as a check on government overreach, not a partner in it. If future presidents adopt this model, monetary policy becomes just another campaign tool. In that case, why pretend? Just make the president the official Fed chair. It's a provocative idea, but one that highlights the peril of politicizing central banking.
He's kind of, the de facto leader, right? He's been in charge. And so people put more weighting. The other members maybe defer to his judgment, but part of that deference may be because they believe that he's independent. But if they believe that he's not, that he's just doing what he's being told by Trump and the Secretary of the Treasury, because the Secretary of the Treasury does what Trump wants, right? Scott Bessent would admit that his personal views are secondary to Donald Trump's. I mean, maybe he disagrees with Trump, behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, Trump is his boss. And so he's there to kind of echo whatever Trump wants him to say. And so if he was in partnership with the with the chairman of the Fed, then in effect, you have Donald Trump, who is the partner with the Fed chairman, which is kind of like making Donald Trump the Fed chair, which is what he wants to be in the first place. So if we're really going to have a partnership, right, between the Secretary of the Treasury and the chairman of the Fed, then why do we even need two men for the job, right? Just have one guy do both. And it doesn't even have to be the Secretary of the Treasury. Just make the president, whoever the president is, make him the Fed chair. Because that's basically what Kevin Warsh is saying. Make Donald Trump the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Okay, well, maybe that should be. Maybe we should say whoever's the president is the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Now, again, he still has to convince the other 11 members, right, to do what he wants, right, which is maybe it would be harder than getting Congress to do what he wants. But we would at least drop the pretense. But I think all of this discussion is misplaced, is dangerous, and it's flat out wrong because Powell is being criticized for the wrong reason. He's being criticized for being too tight when in reality, he is too loose.